I couldn't help but notice that you've clicked on and are presently listening to an episode of the Paranormal Patio podcast. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your support. And if you want to continue to support us, the best thing you can do is share our episodes on social media. That's right. You can tag us in everything. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find us on paranormalpatio.com, where you'll find articles, links to information from our past guests, as well as, every episode as it comes out. Also, head on over to Patreon. Patreon.com/BeyondThePatio. You can get a monthly live stream, at least one. Sometimes we do more. Exclusive bonus content, early access to all of our episodes. And starting with Season 3, I've got to move Season 1 to the archives. So they'll be on Patreon as well, and you can listen to them there. Thanks again for your support. And hey, let's get into the episode. What kind of weird thing are we talking about today? On this episode, we are journeying to some strange dominions with the host of the Strange Dominions podcast, Octavion Graves. We have quite the buffet of topics for you in this episode, and I think you're going to dig all of them. The thing that really struck me with this interview, and I've never really spoken to Mr. Graves outside of talking about coming together and doing a dual podcast episode where he comes on our show and I go visit his, which you can check the link in the description. Hopefully by the time this comes out, we have everything, sort of choreographed properly. But we hadn't really had any conversations about paranormal stuff. There was some very light conversation. But one of the things that really became apparent to me the longer I got into this conversation was, ironically, a lot of synchronicities between he and I, which I didn't expect because of the generation gap. So that's pleasant. And he has really given me this sort of intuition as the conversation developed. So at the end of the episode, I proposed to him a challenge that is something that I want to do, just don't have the time right now. And he has the time and the interest and the drive and the fire of the youth to try to accomplish this. So stick around for the end of the episode for that, for sure. We're going to talk about a lot of things, though. We're going to talk about the influence of social media on our lives, the influence of media on our lives, really. How television and pop culture shape our interests well into adulthood, well past the time that we are the target of said media. We're going to talk about his experiences. We're going to get into a little bit of his background in his newfound philosophies on magic and the occult, and just a really fun conversation. And I think you'll really dig it. I dug it, and I can't wait to go listen to my interview on Strange Dominions. So when you're done listening to this, or if you want, hey, pause it, go listen to that, and then come back and listen to this. I don't care. Just listen to both of them, Just listen to both of us because we're cool, and you should. Yeah. Anyway, killer episode, and thank you so much for 2 years of this insane podcast. It's grown so much, changed so much. I've changed a lot, and I'm very happy to be here with you for this episode. Also, shout out to the fine folks down in Somerset, a varietable cast of characters that I call friends. I'm happy to know in life. I just got back from the Goblin Market / Aunt Lou Day at the home and farm of one Dan Dutton, known as Dandyland. We had a lot of great vendors and folks hanging out, and I got to catch up with Kevin and Jessica from Beyond Sight. You can check out that episode from season 2. Got to catch up with everybody's favorite loon down there in Somerset, Nathan Isaac and Kyle Goodell, Darian West. I got to meet in person the wonderful gal that designed the first Paranormal Patio t-shirt for me, the steam-powered mouse. I bought some killer display pieces, sculptures from Josh Van Hook and his End of the Trail hobby show. You need to go check that out. See if you can pick something up when it becomes available. I just checked his Etsy store, and there's nothing on there right now. Like, it's all gone. But if you want to look at what I bought, you can go over to Instagram and find the post from what would have been either the 23rd or 24th of April. Have a look at what I got, and some great pictures of Dandyland and a lot of selfies from me and everybody that I just mentioned. Also, huge shout out. I finally got to spend time in person with someone who I have had this budding friendship with over the past 2 years, and that's Matthew Bird. And we've never been able to kind of sync up our visits to Somerset, but this time we did. And we went on a fun car ride with his insane GPS that's being affected by the geomagnetics of Somerset. Went to the Dollar General to get some markers and some bottled water. That was a good time. Also, I've been enjoying spending time at Jarfly, the brewery in downtown Somerset. They have not only amazing drinks, but they also have an amazing bartender and manager. If you go, make sure you look behind the bar at Morgan Meredith and hang out with him, because he's really cool. He told me really crazy shit about Somerset. So anyway, hey, welcome to Paranormal Patio, Strange Dominions, Octavion Graves. You're up to bat. Let's hit it.
You're listening to the Paranormal Patio Podcast.
Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I am Jason, and I'm joined tonight by Octavion Graves of Strange Dominions, a new podcast hitting the paranormal airwaves, and it comes with my recommendation. So I have decided, with the cooperation of Strange Dominions, to do a joint podcast where we'll have a guest on my show. He'll have a guest on his show. It's just 2 cool episodes for everyone to listen to. Octavion, welcome to the Paranormal Patio.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm looking forward to the conversation, as I always am. I love to talk weird, man. And your podcast, you've been out for a couple of months now, right?
3 months as of March 10th.
Sweet. So I remember being at the 3-month mark and not knowing what in the world I was going to do. Shortly thereafter, I took a few months off. I didn't know where it was going to go, and now I find myself here. I'm here for it. I love it.
I'm assuming it's brought you a lot of adventures that you may have not otherwise had.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I owe a lot of what I do now to podcasting. So it's great. It's been a great experience, a learning experience. I feel like I just keep getting better as I go along. I feel more confident as I go along anyway. Whether it's better or not is up to the listeners at home, I guess. But I enjoy it. And it has definitely shaped a lot of my life. I'm sure that if you aren't seeing that now, the longer you go, you'll start to see that too.
Oh, no, I definitely, it's already, it's only been 3 months and a few days, and it's already changed my life, dramatic. The people I've met and the quality of people I've met and the connections I've made and things like that, especially with this topic, the synchronicities that I have been experiencing just recently within the last, 2 weeks has been more so than ever before.
Interesting. We'll get into some synchronicity stuff, I think. Before we get too deep into conversation, why don't you let everyone at home know a little bit more about you and your show and what you do?
The tagline for Strange Dominions is bridging the gap between the unknown, the unseen, the unknowable, and just everything weird. But specifically, we're a interview type show, and we'll interview anyone. If you have a weird story, I want to hear it. But there is sort of an overarching narrative, which is to find the connections and parallels between Western esotericism and occult and the paranormal experiences and phenomena that people experience on a mundane level.
I'm with you there, man. I think that's a lot of the driving force behind a lot of us in this space, is trying to connect these dots. And I don't know. I hope we don't ever, because when the mystery of it's gone, I'm afraid it won't be as much fun.
Well, see, I'm the same way. And the thing that I've kind of come to the conclusion is that there's never going to be an end. It will never actually be solved. I think we'll have better methods of experiencing it, but I don't think we'll ever truly understand what it is.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, there's always going to be the next thing, right? So
Right.
This is an ever evolving landscape of mystery. And I mean,
it's evolving. Like, I remember what the paranormal world looked like when I was a kid, when I was just getting into it, and what it looks like now, and just how different it is, and what people are into and what isn't cool, and the kind of new paradigms that are being created that have broken the old paradigms and the old ways of thinking. So it's really been cool to see the progress we've made in our philosophy of the paranormal and the unexplained.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's the few bad eggs, the fascism still, unfortunately, and the misogyny still, unfortunately. And I think as long as we do our best to be the best people that we can be first, only good things are going to come from that. So I'm looking forward to this upcoming generation of researchers, the new John Keels and the new Gray Barkers and, the
new Jacques Vallées.
The new Jacques Vallées. Yes, for sure. And there's a really good space here. We have a lot of, really great minds that are looking into this stuff right now, and that makes me happy. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, it does for me too. I enjoy seeing, all these new thinkers and these new ideas that are being brought to the table where the old guard would have never accepted it, and you would have been, ridiculed and laughed out of even the weird spaces. And so it's interesting to see how much it's opening up in terms of, how people think about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just had a conversation, actually, last night in real time. When the show comes out, it will have been 2 weeks ago, with Nathan Isaac. And Nathan and I have done a lot of research together, and we work together on a lot of projects and things. We had a little chat about how this new generation's kind of like a Hollywood reboot of paranormal investigation, and how we take a lot of the ideas and we find these new connections, and sometimes the connections just reinvigorate these original theories and original stories and bring them forth in a new light, really, that allows more people to connect with them, especially with the communication technology that we have now. I mean, there were no podcasts in John Keel's day. You know what I mean? There's a big change in media consumption and media in general now that allows for conversations like the one we're having right now to take place. And who knows what thoughts or ideas are going to come from that, even if they're not from you or I. Whoever's listening to this right now is going to pick up on something and be like, that's that missing piece. And then they get to go on their hero's journey, and they get to go on their adventure and find, whatever it is that they're looking for in their own way. And because of having this platform, we're able to do that for each other. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And that mirrors how I kind of got started in this and what my reason for doing it was. Yeah. It's interesting to see how much podcasts have become the forefront of new ideas and, new discussions that, you couldn't really do because let's face it, paranormal TV it's very fake and overdone and very plastic. So there's no real genuine research going on in that area. And one of the things that I've noticed, I'm not sure why I never thought about it before, but there's a massive amount of people who enjoy the paranormal and like watching scary videos on YouTube or movies or TV, but then the actual people who are the paranormal community is really, really small and tight knit. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to see how different those two worlds are between just enjoying the paranormal and like living the paranormal.
Yeah, for sure. I think that we're slowly coming out of this sort of like level of shame that comes along with being into this stuff. I think it's only going to grow unless something catastrophic happens that, renders us all the villain in someone else's story. It's less frowned upon now. And a lot of that is due to the popularity of paranormal TV. As bad as it is for the most part, it really opened up a lot of doors for people to talk about this stuff without feeling, ashamed or without feeling afraid that they're going to be, ostracized. I think that's great. I don't want to give credit to paranormal television largely, but for what it is, I mean, we have to a little bit because it has brought us here, So if we didn't have Ghost Hunters in the early 2000s on Sci-Fi, then I doubt the paranormal podcast field would really be anywhere near where it is now. I think it would be even more isolated, and we would still all be the outcasts, more so than we are, So, yeah, thanks, Taps. Thanks a lot. Here we are.
Thanks, Zach Bagans, however you say his name. Because
I
that was like my show, because I think a lot of people really liked Ghost Hunters because it was more realistic than a lot of the shows that were coming out around that time. And Ghost Adventures was really bombastic and in your face, and they were constantly always getting results, whether it was real or not. But it was like, as far as entertainment goes, it was really entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's the entertainment factor, and that's why it's popular, right? I mean, this is stuff that people don't encounter in their daily life, and it's exciting, and it's presented in an exciting way. And then people believe it, and then people go out and try to recreate it and find that it doesn't happen the way that they present it. And then they think it's all horseshit, and it's not. It's just that you can't be Dildo Baggins because there's only one.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. It's interesting how the TV shows, even though the Paranormal podcasts have really changed the field as far as ideas and what's being discussed and what is being done as far as like experiments go. And I haven't really tuned in. I mean, I haven't watched cable TV in probably like 8 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Once like streaming kind of came in, it was just a lot easier to do that because I had a choice of what I wanted to watch. And I think that's, cable TV, I don't know if it's still flourishing in some areas or if it's just on the way out. It's interesting how podcasting has reinvigorated the interest in radio. That I don't think anyone really expected.
For sure.
And, it's different, but it's really similar.
It is. There's a lot more freedom now. With podcasting, like you worked for a radio station, even today, you're limited, you're monitored by the FCC and you're at the mercy of the studio directors who say, this is the target audience. This is what they listen to. This is what we do. And if you don't live in a huge metropolitan area, there's going to be very little interest in you presenting any type of content like a talk radio ghost show or, you know what I mean? And so you have all kinds of freedom sitting in your living room or wherever you are and recording yourself talking or recording other people talking and presenting that in your own way, the way you want it put out. And so, yeah, the freedom of podcasting definitely far and above outshines, the actual radio. But I definitely see where you're getting at there. It has changed the entire landscape for sure.
The one thing that I see pretty consistently being in the podcast world is a lot of people get very upset about the iHeartRadios and the celebrities that are coming on and making these podcasts that are very surface level. They need something else to put their name on. Mm-hmm. I personally don't really like those shows. Like, I don't listen to them. And a lot of people feel like they're squishing the little guy. And for a long time, I agreed with that. And I really didn't like that. But then I started thinking about, okay, well, with these big companies coming in, they're getting the spotlight, but they're also under the microscope. We, like my podcast, your show, and all the other smaller shows that don't have that big of a reach, we still have the freedom to kind of say and do and talk about whatever we want because we have a small but dedicated fan base that enjoys our stuff. When you start getting bigger, you start getting the eyes on you, and it limits you in a lot of ways. So, yeah, it would be cool if there wasn't an iHeartRadio stealing all our listens, but they serve a purpose, and you just kind of make do with that what you will.
There's another benefit to it, though. I mean, with the shows that are just scraping the surface level, is that, maybe they have, let's just say 100,000 listeners to an episode about UFOs, okay? Out of that 100,000 people, 90% roughly maybe will take that and be satisfied. The other 10% are going to search for another topic related to that, find another podcast talking about this stuff, and it's going to be one of us. And then we get to be a part of that person's life. And if we do a good job, then they come back for more. And we get the quality people who are looking for specific things instead of just the surface layer. It's a big benefit for us too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Especially, my show is pretty niche, even in a niche market, because there's plenty of shows talking about the paranormal, and there's plenty of shows talking about the occult. There's not a lot of crossover between the two. at least in the way that I've seen. I know that, one of the reasons I got into this was people like Tim Renner of Strange Familiars and Soraya Azkath of Where Did the Road Go, because they were always talking about these alternate theories. And that got my mind spinning. And then I know how typical it is now, but Hellier comes along and kind of breaks the mold as far as what kind of experimentation can be done in this field. The shows that have a very niche subject, they can still get a very strong, dedicated fan base, even though there's probably not that many people that are into it. The people that are into it are really, like, they found you because of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So we've kind of danced around it a little bit. Let's talk about what got you into the paranormal and why this is a part of your life.
Let me think of the most concise way of putting that, because it's a lot of things. The thing that makes me different than a lot of the people I've heard talk about what got them into the paranormal is I didn't have really any paranormal experiences of my own. Any kind of paranormal experiences I had, I went out looking for. It never just happened to me. But what got me into it was my grandmother, who was an astrologer for years and years and years, since the 60s, and she still does it recreationally now. She was very into, or she is very into, like Edward Gorey, and I've mentioned this a lot on my show because that was a big influence. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. Roughly.
Okay, so
I don't know his biography or anything, but
no, but like his illustrations and the subject matter and the morbid humor, that really got me into it. And my grandparents would always watch these old horror movies and stuff like that, and so that fueled it. And then I would go off and find my own stuff. I was born in 95. Television for kids at that time was in this really, really weird space. Because, they're kids shows, but they're really, really out there. Like Courage the Cowardly Dog, that's a fever dream. Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, like, what is that? But those were my favorite shows growing up. Invader Zim, things like that. And so that just pushed it forward. So I'm kind of a product of my time in a very obscure way, if that makes sense.
100% agree, because I always say it was the Ghostbusters for me, because I never have known a world without the Ghostbusters, and it was still fresh. The cartoon was rocking and rolling whenever I was watching cartoons, and so it became a big part of my life as a young child, with the toys and everything. And then when I was a little older, I got to watch the movies, and it's always been there. That fascination's always been there, and I totally relate. And Courage the Cowardly Dog and the other shows that you mentioned they're great. I didn't get to really enjoy them as much, I guess, in the same way that you did, because, in 95, I was already in 5th grade. I was phasing out of that sort of stage, and I was more into basketball and starting to get into girls and stuff, so I didn't have a lot of time anymore for the Ghostbusters and for Courage the Cowardly Dog, on occasion for sure. Yeah, it's interesting how pop culture shapes our interests, well into adulthood. People don't believe in magic, but there's a lot of magic in captivating an audience, and people that are good at it are really good at it.
Oh, absolutely. When YouTube started, I was, 10, 11 years old. And it's crazy to see when I would search for ghost videos on YouTube back in the day, there was like a bunch of them just by random people. And you never knew if they were real or not. Like I just did this an hour ago. I remembered there's a video, and it was really scary back in 2007. And it's just a guy in his room, and he opens up a door, and there's like a girl crying in a darkened hallway in his house. And so he closes the door and he opens it up again, and now she's standing like right in front of the doorway. And it's stupid stuff like that, but that was terrifying back in 2007.
Yeah.
And the screaming video, like the pop-up videos, the what's it called? The car coming down the hill.
Yeah, the jump scare videos,
Yeah. So, but at the same time, my grandma was really into astrology, and so she taught me a lot of that. And I owe a lot to her for getting me into the weirder stuff. She used to make up ghost stories, like just completely fictional, but she would, that was how I was, taught as a kid. Like ghosts are cool. They're real. It was a part of my like upbringing. It wasn't like just something I found on my own. Like it was kind of pushed onto me, which I enjoyed. Like I liked it a lot. Gordon White of Rune Soup, he always starts his podcasts off interviewing guests by saying, did you have a weird childhood? And I definitely had a weird childhood. It wasn't a paranormal childhood, but it was weird. But yeah, so the three things that I've kind of made a big part of my life is music, magic, and the paranormal. And they all kind of came about to be really important around the same time. I was into the paranormal when I was 5 years old. I started learning about magic and the occult when I was 7 years old. When I was 11, I had grown up on classical music and classic rock, and I was kind of left to my own devices. And so I found through, YouTube, like metal. And I got really into that. And so with metal, that pushes the occult themes and the paranormal themes. So all these three things have been like complementing each other in my life forever.
It's interesting the influence, again, like, music and pop culture have on us. And you can't dismiss even the silliest things, like this song talks about burning a candle on a full moon or whatever, because it inspires people. And it inspires people to research or to blindly follow. I guess it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, I love that. I love that about music and how it can absolutely shape you. I haven't listened to like new music in a long time. I just keep listening to the same stuff I've listened to my whole life. But I never was
into like whatever. And this is a theme that has followed me my entire life. And everybody either makes fun of me for it or gets mad at me about it. And it's not on purpose at all. It is completely involuntary. Whatever I enjoy or whatever I'm gravitated towards, everyone else hates. Or it's like the most obscure thing possible. And so like pop music has never interested me. Or like when I was a kid, emo was really big. But I had already found, death metal at the time. So that was, wimpy stuff to me. I was already listening to Cannibal Corpse and things like that. It's not what the song is about, but the title, a band called Gorguts, it's from like their second album. They had a song called Condemned to Obscurity. And when I was like 13, I was like, oh, okay, that song's about me. Like, cause everything I liked was just super obscure. And I was always that weird kid. Like in third grade during music class, there was a program where you would bring in, like, as long as it was like a piece of classical, you could bring it into class and everyone, like the teacher would put it on, we would all listen to it. And so most kids brought in stuff that like a kid would know. So like the Nutcracker Suite or Beethoven. No, I brought in Chopin's Funeral March because I was really into that in third grade. And so that just kind of alienated me further. But, that's just the kind of kid and person I am. The weirder, the better.
In the past, I want to say like 6 weeks, some of the conversations that I've had for this show have led to me wanting to ask, one, did you suffer any sort of trauma as a child? And two, would it be fair to say that you participated in classes in school that were above your peers? In other words, like, were you in special classes because of your intelligence?
If we're looking at a very broad term of trauma, then yes, because my parents got a divorce when I was 3 years old. It was a messy thing. I mean, I don't remember it that much. And then my mother has had medical issues, very violent seizures my entire life. I mean, some of my earliest memories are, watching her have a seizure. I'm sure that has had some sort of psychological effect on me. As far as the second thing, school was abysmal for me, not because I couldn't do it or like I was not intelligent, but because my grandmother has a PhD in chemistry. She went to college when she was 15 years old. She would tutor me outside of class. And so when I was growing up, I was already exposed to a lot of very advanced subjects and topics. I didn't really put in a lot of effort in school. So I got the opposite. I got put into like, I don't know what the politically correct term is, but like the co-taught class, like,
remedial.
And yeah, exactly. And it was never, and I think I think the teachers, I had this one teacher who used to get really, really mad. And whenever they would have like a parent teacher conference with my parents, they would get really mad and be like, he's the smartest kid in this whole goddamn school and he doesn't give a shit. And it's the most maddening thing because he could do so well, but he just doesn't care. not my biggest regret, but that is something like there are certain parts of me that like I should have just tried. I should have just like I could have done it. It was easy. I just didn't care. And it was because it wasn't like I didn't like learning. I just wanted to learn about specific things. Like history, they were just teaching the basic stuff. You know, they weren't teaching history in an engaging way. They weren't teaching English and history in an engaging way. And so I just checked out all the time.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And let me tell you why I asked those two questions. There is a commonality of people who have suffered emotional and physical trauma in their lives experiencing something paranormal or something that they cannot explain. And for people with higher intelligence, there seems to be a correlation to an interest in uncovering these mysteries. And so I had to know if it was just by chance that you were into this stuff or if you're just like the rest of us. And, you know, maybe I'm not trying to be condescending. Like you're like the rest of us. We're highly intelligent and we're driven to uncover this stuff. So it's interesting that you fall in the same scope as the rest of us, man. Congratulations.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be part of the club.
Yeah.
But like I was saying in the beginning, I was always jealous of the people who actually had paranormal experiences because I didn't have any growing up. I still, like any paranormal experience I've had, I've gone out searching for. It never just came to me like it does a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that commonality. I see it all the time, actually, in a lot of the things that I do and people I talk to.
Yeah, let's get into that. Let's talk about some of your personal paranormal experiences before we dig into your show and how things are going there.
All right, well, it's good because it'll be brief because there's not much. The most definite paranormal experience I ever had, I was in Memphis, Tennessee. Because my father raised me on like old acoustic Delta blues. And so when I was 15, we decided to take a road trip from Memphis to New Orleans and follow Route 61, which is like the blues highway. We were in Memphis and we were on a ghost tour because obviously we had to do that because that was my thing. The majority of the ghost tour was really lame. Like we were in an alleyway and the guy was like, you know, sometimes people see orbs. And then they took us to the outside of an apartment building. And sometimes if you look in this window, there will be a person. But the last stop on the tour was a bar. So there are two things that happened. The first thing happened is in this group, there was a woman and her daughter. There was an upstairs and that upstairs hadn't been touched really since the 20s. So like the walls were peeling, the paint was being torn off. It was just a really rundown area of this bar. The woman has her daughter stand at the top of the stairs going up to the other floor and she takes a picture. And she pulls the camera back from her face and looks at it. And in the picture, there's another little girl, shorter, with a different haircut and different clothes, next to her daughter. I can't prove that she just captured a ghost on camera. I just know what I saw. So that was interesting. And so we all go upstairs. Everybody is just walking around saying, you know, is there anybody here? Do you want to speak to us and stuff like that? And I was like, all right, it's maybe. But I wanted to wait until everyone left. I told my dad, like, hey, like, hang on for a minute. Like, wait till everybody leaves and we'll just chill here for a little bit. And so I have my phone, like, first generation iPhone. I'm recording and I just walk into this room and I say, you know, my name, and if there's anyone here who wants to talk, let me know. I'd love to talk to you. And I didn't hear anything while I was there. But when we were leaving, I pull it up on my phone, and right after I say, like, there's anyone who wants to talk, you can hear a very clear little girl saying, I will. And I wish I still had that recording. It's the coolest recording. Again, I can't prove that there was an incorporeal spirit talking into my phone, but it was 1:30 a.m. in the middle of Memphis, Tennessee. So, I don't know.
Yeah. That
kind of summed up my paranormal experiences for a long time until 2019. You know, I'd been into Bigfoot for my entire life. Like, that was a huge thing for me. It still is. I wanted to go out and, like, look for it because I had kind of realized, okay, they're not just in Washington State. They're where I am, too. There's been reports since the 70s of them where I am in Maryland. So I find a group of guys. They're the flesh and blood type, but when you start talking to them, you realize how much woo is in their philosophy, even though they don't want to admit it. And so I went out with them a couple times, and then I started going out just by myself and a friend. And nothing really happened when I was with the group, except for one of the first nights we went to a wildlife refuge. You're not supposed to go in at night. I was the last one in line. They were all walking to this creek. I guess, it was like a pine cone. A pine cone just flying over my shoulder. It didn't drop down. It was over my shoulder. I watched it come from behind me, over my shoulder, in front of me. Don't know what that was. And then I went out with this guy who I actually met on Facebook. No idea where he is now. He just dropped off the face of the earth. But I'd gone out with him a couple times bigfooting, and he took me to an area near his house, and we camped out. And when people say it was deathly silent, there wasn't a sound, you could hear a pin drop, it was that times like 20, because no sound, no wind, nothing. Towards the middle of the night, you just hear one knock, and that's it. It's the only thing. It's the first time I ever heard a wood knock. And I was like, okay, there's something there. I don't know what the hell that was, but there's something. I've had a couple other, what we'll call peripheral encounters in the woods. I've been screamed at. I've been in Michaud State Forest in Pennsylvania camping, and we were just hanging out there, and my buddy's like falling asleep, and I'm staying up because like I know this area, I know the stories about this area, and I'm kind of like waiting for it. I'm like at a point where I'm like, okay, probably nothing's gonna happen. As soon as I think that, I just hear something go like wahoo, like way off in the distance. And my buddy, who's not really into it, he's like, it's a drunk person. I'm like, yeah, but it's like 4 a.m. I know that sound. Like I've heard that sound on different things, and I don't think it was a person. It could have been, absolutely could have been, but I don't think so. There's an area north of me, about an hour, that I got paced out of with a friend, my actual co-host. We were going up there looking for Bigfoot, but we don't really call it that. Whenever we go out, we say we're like looking for anomalies, because that's, you know, if you don't see it, can't really say what it is. You just know what you heard. So we got paced out one night, and then I went back during the day, probably a month or so after that. It was a very strange sequence of events because it happened really fast. So I'm walking down the main path. I'd been on this path before, but I was going deeper in than I normally had ever been. And I get to this point, it wasn't like mind speak, like it was my own voice, and something just in me was like, okay, you can keep going or you can turn around. But if you keep going, you're not going to like what you see. Like there's something out there that you're not prepared for yet. As soon as that happens, I hear 3 wood knocks to my right, and then what I can only describe as something mimicking a whistle. Not a bird, not a person, just something in between. It came up from behind me, and then it started to kind of go all around, and then a bunch of crows came flying out of a tree next to me, spooked me, and I was like, okay, you know what? I can't. I don't have the equipment. I'm not ready for this. So I walk back to my car, and as I'm walking back, I just hear something real deep just go, oh. And yeah, that was last year. I had talked to Tim from Strange Familiars, and he was only about 2 hours away from me. So I told him about the experience, and he wanted to go up and interview me there and like have me show him where it all happened. So I did. While we were there, and this is on an episode, you can hear it on, I think, 298. I think we start getting followed by wood knocks, like very light tapping, like I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like that, but like all around us, like, and if it was a woodpecker, it was like an entire army of woodpeckers following us around in every single tree. They responded to the same exact pattern that Tim would do with his walking stick on the tree. That was weird. Yeah, that's like the sum of my paranormal encounters.
I dig it, man. The combination of whistles and knocks and growls and grunts, man, that's it. You know, that's a spot for sure. Whatever it is, you know, is it a flesh and blood Bigfoot? Is it just an aspect of fairyland? Is it an interdimensional interloper? Like, you know, who knows what it is, right? That doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is the experience and how it shapes you in your next encounter and how you'll handle yourself, you know? So it's definitely fascinating for sure. I love it. So you had several Bigfoot experiences and a ghost experience. Any interest at all in UFOs or UAPs, if you want to call them that and be weird, or extraterrestrials, or do you lump that into to all being another aspect of this force?
So I do both. I have an interest in it, and I lump it into what we'll call the other.
Yeah,
because I think the paradigm on that is shifting. I don't know if it's just little green men. I don't know. The esoteric aspects of UFO lore is pretty heavy, and there's a lot there. Something about it just doesn't really feel like a nuts and bolts kind of thing. Yeah, I definitely have an interest in it. Not as much. It's not like my area of expertise. Like I could not tell you specific or notable encounters or incidents with it. Like, I don't know the history, but I do have an interest. I mean, I've been to UFO Con when it came to Baltimore.
So it's not something that you go out looking for, though?
Yeah, because I live in Maryland, and it's a small state, and it's pretty built up. I mean, we have rural areas in the West, but for the most part, it's hard to get into, like, true darkness here. So with light pollution, it's just not really feasible just to go and stare off into the sky, because there's no way to really tell what you're looking at. I mean, if it was really apparent, then yeah, but it's just too bright out there.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not that it's not necessarily a focus, it's that it's hard to make it a focus.
If I took a vacation to Nevada, I'd be out, every night looking for it, stargazing and all that.
I'm lucky here because I live in a village where there's maybe 70 people. There's like 20 houses. And, I could go outside right now and look up at the sky and see, whatever's up there. Star-wise, if the sky is clear, I'm going to see everything. I was watching an airplane on my way out here and pulled up my app to see where it was going. I do that a lot. I have the app, the flight map app, but it shows where all the airplanes are, where they're going, because I'm always eyes up. I've seen 3 UFOs. I'm always looking for number 4. So if I see a light, I want to first verify that it's not an airplane. And then I want to be ready finally to record. Like, I want proof that I've seen this, because the others I've seen have been so fast that didn't even dawn on me to have my phone out and have it recording. So I'm looking forward to number 4, looking up. What
is it about the idea of filming it that interests you, as far as, like, does that validate it for you? Like, what is the interest in that? Because that's not like a pointed question at all. I get very curious about the need to, like, document stuff. There's a part of me that feels very strange about that.
It's not a validation thing so much as I want to be able to relive it as it happened and not just in memories, because memory becomes polluted so easily. And another aspect of it is to see if the recording is a direct translation of what happened, or if it changes because it's being recorded. And
okay.
I'm definitely curious about that. And so I want to be able to have both the eyewitness account of it and the video documentation of it so that I can compare. I mean, you're still dealing with a memory that's, might as well just be broken and thrown in the trash at this point because my memory is awful. But the big things, like that, I remember. So, yeah, I want to be able to compare it. I want to know if it's the same. If I see a red light in the sky, I want to know if it shows up as a red light on video or if it changes completely, if it's even there, if it's even possible to record it. And in a lot of ways, I feel like if I saw something and tried to record it and it did not show up in the recording, then I would get more validation from it not being on video. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I completely identify with that. And that would be, like, as far as an experiment goes, that's what I would be interested in trying to film and to see how that differentiates from what I saw or didn't see.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, I'm always ready for that. I want to have that opportunity to make that comparison. So I'm always ready. I'm not necessarily always going out and looking, but if I'm outside and the sky is clear, I'm going to look, I'm going to.
Do you feel like within the paranormal or the unexplained, there are certain subsets of it that attach themselves to certain people as far as other things? Like, for example, UFOs are interesting to me. Like, I like watching UFO documentaries, but it doesn't hit me or attract me as much as Bigfoot does, or like cryptids specifically.
Well, I think I think I have a twofold answer to that. One, I think, yeah, people definitely gravitate towards certain things. Two, I think that you're of a generation that has become more desensitized to UFOs than any other before it, because people that are younger that have grown up with less of the hostility that exists in the conspiracy that the US government and the world governments are hiding these from us. I'm much more bitter about that type of stuff than I'm sure you are because of just the generation gap.
I used to be very, very embroiled in that case, in that idea of the conspiracy, and it did make me mad for a long time. And then my grandmother asked me one time, she was like, so if UFOs are real and aliens are real, why would they need to go through the government? Why don't they just come down and talk to us? And that kind of like, I don't know, that stopped me in my tracks for a minute. I'm like, I never really like thought about it that way.
Yeah. But I guess my point is like the desensitization to UFOs, it does not surprise me that there are much fewer younger people that are into UFOs that are also into other weird stuff. There's definitely the UFO crowd, don't get me wrong. And I know I'm speaking generalizingly, but I'm less surprised to talk to a younger person who is not as interested in UFOs because they've been on CNN at this point. For everybody, you know, my age and older that's into this stuff, it's like, oh my God, they played it on CNN. Like they finally did it. Like, you know, and it's probably fake anyway. Right. But, and no, I'm not fake newsing it. I'm not pulling Trump here. I'm just saying I don't trust anything that's on TV. So. No,
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that stigma, it's a real thing. The idea, like the distrust of the media, that's like, it's annoying to me how that's become like that idea of the media being a propaganda tool that's become politicized, because I don't think that's the case. I think it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. And this is what I say, and I hate getting political because I think, in my opinion, this stuff transcends that concept. I think this stuff really transcends it. So I try not to like let it interfere because it's kind of a distraction. But I shouldn't say the enemy, but the adversarial element in that whole thing, it's coming from above. It has nothing to do with left or right. It's all coming from above. It shouldn't matter who you voted for if you think that TV's lying to you, because it is. It doesn't matter what, you know. So I definitely agree with you there.
No, I mean, the CIA has ran like every major media news outlet for the last like 5 decades. So, I mean, everything that goes out on air goes through the CIA first. They know, and they take what they're told to put out, and they put it out. I mean, everybody's being played, man. Everybody's being played. I know I sound like
Did you ever see, I can't remember, I guess it was like a Twitter post or something, but the Pentagon made a post like, you know, did you know that the Pentagon and the U.S. military works with media outlets to make sure that the U.S. military is, shown appropriately and accurately, find out more. And my buddy was like, what? Like what is that? And I'm like, dude, I've known that for a long time. That they didn't have to come out with that. We knew that.
For sure. Yeah, especially all of us weirdos, right?
But yeah, because and that's the thing about smaller, more independent podcasts. Everything that you hear or see on media, it's going through a filter, except for this. This is one of the last areas where there is no filter, except for if you want to get like sponsors and they're worried about what you say. It's a very unfiltered, raw experience.
It is. Again, though, there are awful people that do these things too, which could use a little censoring. For sure. Luckily, they're easy to avoid because they're easy to recognize. But unfortunately, though, they become a voice for that, that subset of people that feel the same way. And it goes back to what I said earlier, man. We're still combating fascism in 2022. And I don't harp on it a lot, but it's fresh in my mind right now because of everything that's gone on in the last 3 years. Yeah, no, I don't want to get more into it. Like, let's just move on from it.
We're on the same page. I'm totally there with you. I mean, the only thing that I'll say about it is that, and I know that this is probably a worn out idea, but the most effective fight against intolerance is education and exposing to new ideas. That's always been my motto is, if someone's a really hateful person, if there's any inkling of willingness to learn or to change, proper education, that'll help remarkably. Just being exposed to new ideas and new paradigms and things like that, it'll completely shatter everything you knew and, make you a better person, I think.
And unfortunately, we live in a society where the education system is underfunded intentionally.
Don't you know it?
And those experiences with education in the public school system do not exist. And for the majority of people, they go to a public school and they don't have that opportunity to really learn. They learn how to take tests, and that's what they do. Memorize this. Take this test. Memorize this.
It's all about how well you can keep something in your head. It has nothing to do with the lessons or the values in any of it. It's just, can you follow directions? Good. then you can go have a job. But like, it doesn't go further than that. I saw that really, really early on in school, and that's what made me reject it so hard. And I ended up getting, punished for it in a lot of ways. I don't feel any issue with that. Like, I'm glad I did what I did in school because it shaped me in a lot of ways that I find myself thankful for.
Oh, we have covered a lot of different aspects of this here in this conversation already. I'd like to talk about your show a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'd like to know, not so much from the perspective of a podcaster, but I want you to talk about the content of your show, some of the things that you have either learned or that you're proud to have put out that reflect where you are in the paranormal space, if that's not too big of an ask.
I would love to. The only issue is that because the show is so new, it hasn't really formed itself the way I want it to. Right now, we're just a occult paranormal interview show, and that's fine. The overarching mission is only just starting to show itself in my episodes. The thing that I have been thinking about is this podcast and me doing it. I'm not coming from an area of long-standing expertise or experiences. I started this podcast because for some dumb reason I wanted to publicly document my journey in learning about this stuff and experiencing it for myself. And I think I want to be the show for the kid or the person that has always been really into this stuff but has never known how to get into it. Has always felt on the outside of actually doing it. Because I am that kid. When I was younger and I wanted to actually practice the occult, because I've always been interested in it, I would go to shows or I would meet people who were clearly into it in some facet, and I would say, like, listen, you're into this stuff. I want to get into it. I want to practice. Can you, like, show me or, like, mentor me or, like, point me in the right direction? And I will always get met with the same answer, like, oh, well, if you're not into it already, I can't help you. Like, you got to do it for yourself. It would drive me up a wall because, while, yes, that's a valuable trait, the whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of deal. It doesn't help when you don't have any straps. You don't have any shoelaces yet. So there's no way for you to pull yourself up by them because you don't have them. You need someone to give them to you first, and then you learn as you go. It wasn't until I was older. And, there's been a long fight in my brain about, like, oh, man, I should have, like, really tried to get into this more when I was younger. Like, when I was a teenager, I should have really pushed it into overdrive with my want to, like, actually practice it. But, it's not that long ago. But there weren't really that many resources. There weren't that many people talking about it. It was still a pretty underground thing, even for people like me who were into the underground. It was more underground than that. Now I'm older and I'm getting into it and I'm starting my practice and finding out all these things. And so I want to be the show for the kid and the person that couldn't get into it. Like, they didn't know how, they didn't know where to go. And so they were kind of just left with their hands open. Like, well, what do I do now? Like, everyone I talk to, they don't know what I'm talking about, or they don't want to help me, or, and stuff like that. So that's kind of been my lesser mission.
Yeah. I don't want to be like cliche and that guy right now, but I'm like, the path presents itself when there's a traveler who can handle it. Maybe you just weren't ready yet, and now you are. So now you have, even if it means forging your own path for a little while, you'll have a path. And that's something to look at it in a different way. Don't beat yourself up because you didn't push yourself harder into it whenever you were younger.
I mean, it comes, and I've talked about this on my show, it comes from when I turned 25, I went through a complete and total existential crisis because my brain had matured and I realized, like, oh my God, like, this is reality. All these things that I wanted aren't feasible. All these ideas that I had aren't how they really are. Like, I have to kind of reshape my understanding of reality to get anywhere, because if I hadn't, then I would just be left in the dust. And it was really, really hard for me to go through that most of last year. This year, I've been able to kind of get myself out of that and look at it like, okay, I got into it when I needed to get into it. When I was 16, I would have, blown my face up with whatever I was trying to get into. If I'd actually had the ability to do it, it would have gone terribly wrong. So I'm kind of lucky in that way. I think things are just unfolding in the right way, like the way that it was like the most proper path, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mentioned at the beginning, we can talk about synchronicities a little bit. What synchronicities have been presented to you that have been the most profound for you to be a part of?
I'd say 2 weeks ago, I posted on an occult group on Facebook that I had been a member of for a while. And I basically just said, hey, I'm an aspiring occultist. I'm a beginning magician and I have a podcast and I'm basically trying to find the magical links to the paranormal. And if there's any kind of magical techniques that one can use to kind of experience the paranormal where you're more in control and it's not you're not at its mercy. Does anyone else who's been in the paranormal or the occult scene for a long time, do you have any interesting thoughts on that? Have you ever had a similar idea? And this guy responds and he basically says exactly or very, very closely things in his comment that I had only spoken to my co-host about privately, like theories and ideas. And then we start talking and a synchronicity storm, the likes I had never experienced before, begins in the course of a couple hours. He starts saying stuff like, I actually have a screenshot because he's like, hey man, when you get into this magic stuff, like for real, what if you could evoke a cryptid? And I was like, what? Like, no, I just said that to my friend. I've never said it on the show. I've never talked about that publicly. That's just been an idea in my head that I've said to my friend, but exactly those words. And so we just start talking and location stuff starts syncing up. I didn't know he was from Maryland or lived in Maryland until a few hours after we'd started talking. Then I tell him where I live and he tells me, oh, I have an ex who I've been talking to yesterday about going down there to hang out with them. And he knows someone that was on my show because I would go to the club that he was a security guard for, and just all these really weird things, just all these very strange coincidences. It really felt like whatever I was dealing with or whatever I was getting into, you're on the right path. Keep going. I'm now giving you someone that will help you with it and may have more experience in this than you do and can show you what they've been up to and what, kind of giving me a real kick in the ass to just, do it and get into it. So yeah, that's been really, really interesting. With the podcast itself, the similarities between, Western occultism, specifically like ceremonial magic and traditional magic, and the parallels between that and a lot of new ideas about the paranormal are syncing up really, really weird and very quickly and very, very substantially. And it's interesting to me how many people in the occult never really thought about the paranormal and how many people with the paranormal are terrified of the occult. So there's this block, there's this wall, and I'm trying to break it down, and I think it's breaking itself down in front of me, and I'm just helping it along.
Yeah. I dig that. That's a hell of a metaphor. I see it as well. I've seen it for a while. I don't know what it is, man. I don't know if it's just exposure. I don't know if it's just a sign of the times. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely eroding.
On you until you were entering the new eon.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
Yeah.
No. I don't know. I don't know what it is, man. If you're gonna sell me on it being a new eon, I'm gonna need a list of books that I'm expected to buy so I can get in on it.
Yeah.
You can't prophesize that way without presenting a list of things that everyone's expected to do. You step it up, man. Come on.
Right, exactly. You need to start a grade system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then you always have to be the top. And if somebody else reaches that, then you have to make a new level.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know how it works. You'll be fine. Good luck.
Yeah. And God, it's so weird. So the way that I came about, I should probably tell you like how this all started, right? Like why this exists.
Yeah.
Okay. So the idea of ghosts, ghost hunting, ghosts being the souls of dead people, got kind of tired of it. Didn't really jive with me anymore. Felt very, very boxed in by that whole paradigm. So been Bigfooting for a long time. This summer of 2020, I have a group of friends. The four of us, we were not really versed in psychedelia or anything like that. And so we meet this guy. He becomes very fast friends with us. And he's like, man, you ever done mushrooms before? And we're like, no, but sign us up. And so I had 3 trips at that point. Very good, very low dose, very fun, somewhat illuminating, but more fun and enjoyable trips. And my 4th trip was the most terrifying and beautiful trip I've ever had. Like, just as an experience-wise, never experienced anything like that. And that is funny because it absolutely, I don't think it brought about, but it put my existential crisis on, like, hyperdrive. When I turned 25, all these things were breaking down in the world around me as far as like how I thought about them. And then mushrooms were like, oh, you don't even know. Like, let me show you what things are really like. After that trip, I, was kind of reevaluating my life, reevaluating what I was into, what I wanted to do. And I remembered that when I was younger, I had a strong interest in Norse paganism because I have some lineage to that. Most of my family is what we'll call Jewtheist, meaning they're culturally Jewish and they've been a long line of Jews, but the religion never came into it at all. I do have a part of my family that is from the Isle of Man, and that was a Viking holdout for years and years and years before Christianity like came to Europe. I was thinking like, okay, well, like I want to get into this, but I also wanted to get into magic, like really like practicing magic, because mushrooms were like, yeah, it's real. Like, you don't have to worry. It's real. It's totally real. And I was like, okay, well, like, how do I do it? And so I start looking at things and I'm trying to find different paths and different currents to follow and things like that. And I was getting fed up with the new age neo-pagan groups because they had this very romantic idea of what the Norse believed back then. The neo-pagans have no link. They have no link to anything of the past. It is a completely new invention. They take some historical stuff, but they don't have a concept of it from a realistic point of view. On the adverse of that, they take this idea of what that is, of what paganism, what the Norse believed and what old Europe believed. They make it this very almost like reductionist material view of, we just celebrate the holidays, like the gods are real, but like not really, like it's they're at conflict with each other about that. I would tell them like, why is there no like real magic here? And like, well, because that's not really like what the Norse did. And I'm like, read the Eddas, because Odin was a necromancer, man. Like Odin, the only reason they know about Ragnarok was because he summoned the soul of a dead witch and made her tell him about the future. And she told him about Ragnarok. Magic was absolutely a part of their culture, but they don't know what it was. They don't know how to practice it because what it wasn't written down, and whatever was written down was burned or destroyed. So I'm like, okay, I have this interest in paganism. I have this interest in magic. Let's combine them. Let's somehow bring them together. So I start doing that. I start looking at traditional pagan sources, the Eddas, Saxo Grammaticus, History of the Danes, stuff like that. And I start looking at magic. I start finding interesting parallels. And at the same time, I'm like really diving into alternate theories about the paranormal. The magic stuff starts coming up stronger and stronger. And then I started seeing the links between magic and the paranormal. Books like Where the Footprints End, Tim Renner and Joshua Cutchin, massive influence. Hellier came out around that time. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started. It's interesting to me when you get into magic and you start looking at kind of the postmodern view of magic, and then you look at how magic was done before that, even before Crowley and Mathers and the Golden Dawn, just how different of a landscape that is. But that specifically, like, there's a lot of, God, there's so much there. There's so much there. It's just weird to me that it's never really been looked at this way. Like, I'm talking to people who've been practicing the occult for years and years and years, and I'm bringing up parallels to different paranormal stuff, and they're like, that's really weird because I never thought of that, but that you're right on track. You're heading down this road that it's weird that no one has ever walked down before, and it's kind of an alienating experience, if that makes sense, but it's also really illuminating. So I feel like that was a very long-winded ramble. I apologize.
I wouldn't call it a ramble. I mean, it was coherent. I mean, long, sure.
Try to introduce like 4 different topics into one thesis. So.
No, yeah, you did fine, man. Don't worry about that. I want to ask you one more question before I let you plug all of your stuff. What do you think about the idea of these, ancient is a poor choice of word, historical secret societies, occult societies, protecting left behind valuables and land and sacred sites with cryptids, magic? There's
absolutely something there. I mean to explore that. It's part of the reason why I was so interested in your show. I wanted to set this up because there's a lot of crossover there. And I definitely think that's a thing. I absolutely think that the old lodges and the old orders, they tapped into something that kind of advanced to their magic. And now they don't want to let it go because the orders are dying. The Theleme is still around. The Golden Dawn is a shadow of its former self. Freemason's still going strong, but they don't really they're not part of they're not like voluntarily esoteric. Like they get called esoteric at a cult, but I don't think that they identify with that.
Not at all.
So yeah. And that theory about these old orders and these old lodges kind of protecting these areas of high strangeness. One of the questions that led me down this road was if you watch any old movie, any old TV show, like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, paranormal shows, you'll watch them go into like an area, right? And they'll say, lots of ghosts have been reported here. There's been cryptid activity. And in the 80s, there was a satanic cult. Or there was a witches' coven and they were doing stuff here. And they like imply that the cult or the coven or the whatever has something to do with the high strangeness, but they don't explore the specifics of that connection. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want to know if this area is weird because the Thelemites were doing stuff or the Rosicrucians were doing stuff. And also, like, do different kinds of magic produce different kinds of phenomena, or does any kind of magic produce just phenomena in general? Is there any kind of distinction between them? That's one of the questions that I absolutely want to explore.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a proposition or a challenge to you, should you choose to accept it. And if you don't, you don't. I would like for you to look across historical maps of Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe Missouri, and try to make some sort of a guide to show on these maps known representations from the Knights of the Golden Circle. And then I want you to cross-reference that map with sightings of Bigfoot, Dogman, and UFO sightings and contactee cases. See if there's any correlation between these two topics.
Challenge accepted.
Because I think that's right up your alley.
Oh yeah, man. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
I want to know. You have to let me know if you find anything, because it's something I want to do. I just don't have time.
I've already done this research. That's what I feel like you're having me do this. That way I can come to you with my results and you can be like, okay, but you're wrong here. You're right here.
No, that's not the case. I do genuinely want to know this because I don't have the time to sit down and do this. I am too busy. I have too much going on. But this is a pressing thing in my head the last year or so, and I really want to know, and I think you're the perfect person to do it because of the approach that you're taking to both fields. And I think that if it's there's a good chance you'll be able to find that connection just because of the drive you have for it. So for me to pass that on to you means I don't have to do it, and I can still probably get at least the same caliber of answer I wanted, but it'll most likely be a higher caliber of answer than what I would have found on my own.
You're putting a lot of stock in me, and I appreciate that. I just hope I don't disappoint you.
I won't be disappointed because if you don't, I'll be in the same boat and I can just do it myself.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm absolutely going to do that. I'm lucky that I do have the free time I do, so I can kind of do these kind of experiments. So absolutely, I will definitely get on that.
Yeah. And then whenever you have your list of correlations and your locations and you have come to a decision, then you let me know and come back on the show and we'll talk about it.
It's a done deal, man. I'm totally into it.
All right. That's perfect. In the meantime, you've accepted the challenge. So why don't you go ahead and plug Strange Dominions, tell people where they can find it, what's going on with it, maybe upcoming episodes, that type of thing.
Okay. So you can find Strange Dominions at strangedominionspodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube page. We have an Instagram page. Those are all our social media sites. You can listen to it on our website or literally wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, Podfiend, Podfriend, whatever, all of them. We're on all of them. I think the only one that we're not on is the Google podcast place. And I don't know why. It just for some reason hasn't gone through my hosting service, but everything else I'm on.
You do lose a point for being on Apple, but that's okay. I don't fault you. That's just my personal decision. I don't.
Well, we're not on Twitter, so that's my personal decision.
I love Twitter, man. Everybody's insane there. It's great.
I keep thinking I should make one, and then I see something that just drives me nuts, and I'm like, oh god, I don't want to be a part of that.
See, I was a late comer for Instagram. I started my Instagram in September. And I hated Facebook. I hated the idea of Facebook when it came out. And I was on MySpace. And I was the last holdout in my friend group. I'm not giving up MySpace. You kidding? I could put music on my MySpace. And then, MySpace died. And I joined Facebook. And then I refused to join Twitter. And then Instagram came out and I joined Twitter. And then eventually, last year, decided I'd go ahead and make an Instagram for the show. Not personal, just for the show. Twitter is the same, though. I don't have a personal Twitter anymore. Well, I assume it's still there.
I wasn't on MySpace. I was on Vampire Freaks before Facebook. That was my holdout. And then that started to die out, and everyone moved over to Facebook, and then Vampire Freaks became a group on Facebook. I'm like, well, okay, fine. I'll just go do that.
Yeah. You weren't on MySpace because you couldn't type yet.
I was just towards the end of it, I made an account and never touched it because it was already on its last legs.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Oh boy. Okay. Young blood coming in and doing my dirty work for me. And I think...
Happy to do it.
I think we'll both enjoy what you find. If my intuition and rough research into it is anywhere near correct, I think that may be a really big stepping stone for you in this path that you put yourself on.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the tip because I've been looking for new, specific things to research because I have my list of topics to go through, but that just adds a whole new level to it of a very specific thing to research and stuff. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing what happens one way or the other. Yeah, I think we can wrap this episode up and make sure you head over, catch some Strange Dominions. For God's sakes, interact with him on Instagram to tell him to get a Twitter account. And then, everything's great.
If anyone listening is into neo-paganism or neo-druidry, we're having John Michael Greer on next week, who within that side of the occult, he's a pretty big deal. So I'm excited to have him on and show people his theories on the paranormal and magic.
All right. I dig it. Looking forward to the episode. Until next time, everybody, thanks for hanging out in Paranormal Patio, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Until next time, keep the fire going.